The silence was what Soren noticed first, not the abandoned cars strewn across the highway like discarded toys, not the dried blood painting the asphalt in abstract patterns, but the absolute absence of sound. No birds sang. No wind rustled through the skeletal remains of the trees. Even his own breathing seemed swallowed by the oppressive quiet that had become the world's new language. He crouched behind the husk of a delivery truck, his rifle trained on the pharmacy across the street, watching for movement that wasn't the living dead. 3 months had passed since the first reports emerged from overseas. 3 months since the word epidemic transformed into pandemic, then into something far worse, extinction event. Soren remembered the exact moment his old life ended, standing in his apartment, watching his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, devour her husband on their balcony while the news anchors stopped pretending everything would be fine. Now, Mrs. Chen and her husband were just 2 more shambling corpses in a world that had forgotten how to scream. The pharmacy door hung crooked on broken hinges. Soren had been tracking it for 2 days from various vantage points, noting the patterns of the infected that wandered through this part of the city. They moved in clusters now, like schools of fish, drawn together by some instinct that scientists would never get the chance to study. He needed antibiotics, not for himself, but for the little girl burning with fever in the basement of an office building 4 blocks away. Her brother had found Soren yesterday, a scrawny 10-year-old named Kale with dirt-smudged cheeks and eyes too old for his face. "Please," Kale had whispered, tugging on Soren's jacket. "Eloan needs medicine. She's all I have left." Soren had learned to say no. He'd learned that survival meant solitude, that attachments were anchors dragging you toward the grave. But something in the boy's desperate grip reminded him of his own brother, lost in the first chaotic weeks when the military still pretended they had control. Against every survival instinct he'd cultivated, Soren had followed Kale to the basement where his sister lay shivering under a ratty blanket, her skin hot enough to radiate warmth in the cold room. Now, watching the pharmacy, Soren calculated odds and angles. The infected were slower in cold weather, that much he'd learned. It was late October, and the temperature had dropped significantly over the past week. The 3 corpses he could see shuffling near the pharmacy's entrance moved with the lethargy of dying batteries. He could make it. Get in, grab what he needed, get out. He was about to move when a hand touched his shoulder. Soren spun, rifle rising, his finger a heartbeat away from the trigger. The woman who'd appeared behind him raised both hands, her dark eyes wide but unafraid. She was perhaps 40, with black hair streaked with premature gray, wearing a military jacket that had seen better days. "Easy," she said softly. Her voice was accented, French, maybe. "I'm Mireille. I've been watching you watch that pharmacy. You're making a mistake." "I work alone," Soren whispered, lowering the rifle but keeping his distance. "And you'll die alone if you go in there," Mireille replied. "There are 17 infected inside. I counted them through the back windows. You see 3 at the front, but the others are dormant in the storage area. Make noise, and they wake up." Soren studied her face, looking for deception. In this new world, trust was a currency more valuable than gold and just as rare. "Why tell me?" "Because I need antibiotics too," Mireille said. "And because 2 people have a better chance than 1. There's a clinic 3 miles east. Smaller, less obvious. Probably still has supplies." She paused. "I have a truck. Still has half a tank of gas. Gas won't help if we're dead. Optimism won't help if we're sick." Mireille's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I heard you talking to that boy yesterday. The girl, how bad is her fever?" Soren's jaw tightened. He'd thought they were alone in that building. "Bad enough. Then we don't have time to debate." Mireille gestured toward a side street. "My truck's hidden 2 blocks south. We go to the clinic, get the medicine, come back. Simple." Nothing was simple anymore. But Soren thought of Eloan's labored breathing, of Kale's desperate hope. He thought of his brother's last words crackling through a dying cell phone connection. Don't give up on people, Sor. Promise me. Lead the way, Soren said finally. As they moved through the silent streets, Soren wondered if he'd just made the decision that would save his life or end it. The truck was a battered Ford pickup, its blue paint faded to gray and one headlight shattered, but the engine turned over with a smooth rumble that sounded obscenely loud in the dead city. Soren climbed into the passenger seat, his rifle positioned between his knees, every muscle tense. Mireille drove with practiced efficiency, navigating around abandoned vehicles and the occasional wandering corpse without seeming to think about it. How long have you been in the city? Soren asked, breaking the silence that had stretched for 10 minutes. Never left, Mireille replied, her eyes fixed on the road. I was visiting from Montreal when the borders closed. By the time I thought about trying to get home, there was no home to get to. The news showed footage before the networks went dark. Montreal burned. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry now. Sorry doesn't resurrect the dead, not the way we'd want them resurrected, anyway. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. What about you? You're not from here originally either. I can hear it in the way you talk. Soren glanced at her, surprised. Most people were too focused on survival to notice linguistic details. Colorado. Boulder. I came here for a job that doesn't exist anymore, in a world that doesn't exist anymore. What did you do? Before? Architect. I designed buildings that will outlast humanity now. The irony wasn't lost on him. You? Virologist, Mireille said, and Soren's head snapped toward her. She caught his expression and shook her head. Not that kind. I studied plant pathogens, not human ones. But I know enough to understand what we're seeing isn't natural. This virus, plague, whatever it is, it was engineered. Everyone has theories. I have evidence, Mireille countered. Or I did, before my lab was overrun. The progression is too fast, too perfect. Natural evolution doesn't work like this. Someone made this, Soren. Someone decided the world needed to end. They passed a school, its playground equipment now draped with the remnants of a quarantine fence. Soren saw small shapes behind the chain link, children, or what used to be children, their jerking movements a mockery of the games they'd once played. He forced himself to look away. The clinic, Mireille said, pointing ahead. There. The building was nondescript, a squat two-story structure wedged between a burned-out restaurant and a collapsed apartment complex. The windows were intact, and the door appeared undamaged, both good signs. But Soren had learned that appearances in this new world were often fatal lies. They parked a block away and approached on foot, moving in practiced silence. Mireille, Soren noted, knew how to move, weight on the balls of her feet, checking corners, using cover. Not the movements of a scientist, but a soldier. Another mystery in a world full of them. The clinic's door was locked, which was promising. The infected didn't lock doors. Mireille produced a slim set of lock picks from her jacket, and within 30 seconds, the door swung open with a soft click. Inside, the smell hit them immediately, antiseptic and decay, a nauseating combination that made Soren's stomach lurch. The reception area was chaos. Papers scattered across the floor, chairs overturned, dark stains on the walls that could be blood or could be anything. But no bodies, and more importantly, no infected. They moved deeper into the clinic, Soren taking point while Mireille covered their rear. The pharmacy storage was behind a reinforced door that had been left open. Shelves lined the walls, though many were empty, ransacked by earlier survivors or the clinic's own staff in desperate final hours. But there, on the third shelf, Soren spotted the orange bottles. Antibiotics. Painkillers. Antivirals that wouldn't help against the plague but might stave off other infections. Jackpot, he whispered. Too easy, Mireille murmured behind him, and Soren's instinct screamed agreement. The voice came from the darkness beyond the storage room, cultured and amused. I wouldn't say easy. I'd say convenient. For me. A man stepped into view, flanked by two others carrying rifles. He was tall, perhaps 60, with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. His clothes were clean, impossibly clean in this filthy world, and his smile was the coldest thing Soren had seen since the outbreak began. My name is Dmitri, the man said. And you've just walked into my clinic. I'm afraid there's a toll for taking my supplies. Everything has a price, even in the apocalypse. Especially in the apocalypse. Soren's rifle started to rise, but the two flanking guards already had theirs trained. The math was simple and lethal. Easy, Dmitri said, his smile never wavering. I'm not unreasonable. You can have your medicine. But first, you're going to do something for me. Dmitri gestured for them to lower their weapons, his own men keeping their rifles trained with unwavering precision. Soren exchanged a glance with Mireille, seeing his own calculation reflected in her dark eyes. They could fight, but the odds were poor, and Aloan didn't have time for them to fail. What do you want? Soren asked, slowly lowering his rifle. Straight to business. I appreciate that. Dmitri moved closer, his polished shoes clicking on the tile floor like a countdown. I run a community about 6 miles from here. 47 people, give or take, all trying to survive in this beautiful nightmare we've inherited. We have shelter, food, security. But we're missing something crucial, a way forward. A way forward? Mireille's accent thickened with tension. In case you haven't noticed, there is no forward. Only survival. That's where you're wrong, my dear. Dimitri's eyes gleamed with something Soren recognized from the old world, ambition. Before the collapse, there were rumors. A facility upstate, a research installation run by the military and CDC. They were working on a cure, or so the whispers said. More importantly, they were working on immunity protocols, ways to protect the uninfected. If such a place existed, it's been overrun, Soren said. Perhaps. Or perhaps it's sealed, waiting for someone clever enough to access it. Dmitri pulled a folded map from his jacket, spreading it on a nearby counter. His finger traced a route north. Here. Fort Callahan. A biological research facility buried in the mountains. I have intel suggesting it's still intact, possibly still operational. Soren studied the map. The facility was marked deep in the wilderness, far from any major city. It would be a 3-day journey, maybe 4, through territory crawling with infected. You want us to go there? I want you to verify what's there and, if possible, bring back any research, supplies, or information you can find. Dimitri's smile thinned. In exchange, you get your medicine now, and when you return, you get a place in my community. Safety. Food. A future that's more than scavenging and running. And if we refuse? Mireille asked. Then you leave empty-handed, and I make sure everyone in the region knows you're not to be helped or traded with. My community isn't the only one out there, but it is the most connected. You'd be surprised how quickly survivors have established communication networks. Dmitri folded his arms. I'm offering you a chance at something better than mere existence. All it costs is a few days and some risk you'd be taking anyway. Soren's mind raced. The sick girl, the desperate boy, the promise he'd made. But also the impossibility of what Dmitri asked. We'd need supplies. Weapons. Transportation. All of which I can provide. Dmitri snapped his fingers, and one of his guards lowered his rifle, disappearing into the back room. I'm not sending you to die. I'm investing in a potential return. If you succeed, everyone benefits. If you fail, well, you would have died eventually anyway. At least this way, your death serves a purpose. The guard returned with a pack, setting it on the counter. Dmitri unzipped it, revealing bottles of antibiotics, bandages, water purification tablets, and canned food. A show of good faith. Enough to treat your sick friend and keep you alive for a few days. But the real supplies, weapons, vehicle, maps, additional medicine, those come when you agree to my terms. Mireille stepped closer to Soren, her voice low. This is insane. We don't know him. We don't know if this facility even exists. But we know the girl is dying, Soren whispered back. And we know we can't keep scavenging forever. If there's even a chance he's right. There's always a chance. There's also always a trap. Soren looked at the antibiotics in the pack, then at Dimitri's patient, predatory smile. He thought of his brother, of the promises made to the dead, of the living who still depended on the kindness of strangers. We'll need a third person. Someone who knows medicine. Dimitri's eyebrow arched. You're negotiating? You want this done right, you need someone who can identify what's worth bringing back. We're not scientists. Fair enough. Dimitri considered this. I have someone. Yara. She was a trauma surgeon before the collapse. Not a researcher, but she understands medical protocols and documentation. She's been wanting to leave the community anyway, restless type. She'll accompany you. When do we leave? Mireille asked, her voice resigned. Tomorrow at dawn. That gives you time to treat your little patient and prepare. Dimitri handed Soren the pack. Don't try to run. I have people everywhere, and I always collect my debts. One way or another. As they left the clinic, the weight of the pack felt heavier than it should. Soren had survived 3 months of the apocalypse by trusting no one and avoiding complications. Now, in the span of a few hours, he'd acquired a partner, a mission, and a debt to a man whose smile suggested he'd thrived in this dead world more than he ever had in the living one. We're going to die, Mireille said matter-of-factly as they climbed back into the truck. Probably, Soren agreed. But not today. Today, we save a little girl. And tomorrow? Soren looked out at the silent city, at the ashes of everything that had been and the uncertain shape of what might be. Tomorrow, we find out if the past left us anything worth building on. The drive back was quiet, but it was a different silence than before, not empty, but filled with unspoken questions and the weight of choices that couldn't be unmade. Kale's eyes went wide when Soren opened the pack and showed him the antibiotics. The boy's hands trembled as he took the bottles, reading the labels with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that details meant survival. This is enough, Kale whispered. This is enough to help her. The basement office where they'd sheltered was a forgotten space, likely abandoned even before the collapse. Water-stained ceiling tiles, broken computer monitors, and the musty smell of neglect. But it was hidden, defensible, and Aloan lay in the corner wrapped in blankets that Kale had scavenged, her face flushed with fever, her breathing shallow. Mireille knelt beside the girl, pressing her palm to Aloan's forehead. How long has she been this sick? 4 days, Kale said. She cut her leg climbing through a broken window. I cleaned it, I really did, but it got infected anyway. I tried to find medicine, but every pharmacy I found was either empty or full of those things. You did well getting her this far, Mireille said gently. She examined the wound on Aloan's leg, an angry red gash with the telltale signs of infection spreading from it. This is serious, but treatable. The antibiotics should work if we start them now. They spent the next hour tending to Aloan. Mireille cleaned and redressed the wound with supplies from Dimitri's pack while Soren measured out the medication. Kale hovered nearby, his thin frame vibrating with nervous energy, until Soren gently pushed him toward the corner where they'd set up their meager food supplies. Eat something, Soren said. When's the last time you had a real meal? I eat when Aloan eats, Kale replied, but his eyes betrayed his hunger. "She needs you strong," Soren said, opening a can of beans and handing it over with a spoon. "Can't take care of her if you collapse." While Kale ate with the desperate speed of the starving, Soren joined Mireille by Eloan's makeshift bed. The girl had swallowed the first dose of antibiotics and fallen into a deeper sleep, her fever already seeming less aggressive. "She'll live," Mireille said quietly. The infection was bad, but not too far gone. Another day or two without treatment, though. "I know." Soren watched Kale scrape the last of the beans from the can. "Which makes what we're doing tomorrow even stupider. We should stay with them, make sure she recovers fully." "But we won't, because Dmitri owns us now." Mireille's voice was bitter. "The moment we took that pack, we sold ourselves. That's how men like him work. They don't force, they offer you a choice that isn't really a choice at all." "Did you see another option?" "No," she admitted. "Which makes it even more infuriating." Footsteps on the stairs made both of them reach for their weapons, but the voice that called down was female and calm. "Dmitri sent me. I'm Yara. May I come down?" Soren and Mireille exchanged glances. Slowly, Soren called back. "Hands visible." The woman who descended into the basement was perhaps 35, with olive skin, dark hair pulled into a practical braid, and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much suffering. She wore cargo pants, a heavy jacket, and carried a medical bag that had seen extensive use. "You're our third," Mireille said. "Apparently." Yara's gaze swept the basement, landing on Eloan. "The girl? Infected leg wound. Started her on antibiotics an hour ago." Yara approached, her movements professional and assured. She examined Eloan without asking permission, checking pulse, pupils, the wound itself. "Good work." "The dosage?" Mireille told her, and Yara nodded approval. "She'll need another dose every 8 hours. The fever should break within 24 hours if we're lucky, 48 if we're not. The infection should respond, but watch for signs of sepsis, rapid heartbeat, confusion, cold extremities." "You know your medicine," Soren observed. 6 years of medical school, 4 years of residency, and 8 years in trauma surgery. "I'd better know my medicine." Yara settled onto an overturned crate, her expression weary. "Dmitri told you about the facility?" "Fort Callahan. He says it might have research, a cure, immunity protocols." "It might," Yara said. "Or it might be a tomb full of infected researchers and soldiers. Or it might be completely empty. Or it might not exist at all. Dmitri has a lot of theories about a lot of things." "But you're coming anyway," Mireille said. "I'm coming because staying in Dmitri's community means watching him consolidate power while pretending it's for everyone's benefit. I've seen this movie before. Strongman emerges during crisis, promises security, slowly transforms protection into control." Yara's jaw tightened. "I'd rather take my chances with the infected than become part of his little empire." "He's that bad?" Soren asked. "He's that smart," Yara corrected. "Which makes him dangerous. He's built something real, a functioning community with rules and structure. People are safer with him than without him. But safety has a price, and he's collecting payment in loyalty and dependence. Give him a cure or immunity protocol, and he doesn't share it. He leverages it. Becomes the only game in town. So why are we helping him?" Mireille demanded. "Because if the facility has anything useful, we take it for ourselves first," Yara said, her voice hard. "We make copies. We hide samples. We ensure that whatever we find doesn't become one man's monopoly on survival. That's why I agreed to this mission, not for him, but to make sure he doesn't own whatever future might exist." Soren studied this woman who'd been thrust into their desperate venture. "You've thought this through." "I've had time. Dmitri's been planning this for weeks, waiting for the right people to show up. You two walked into his web at exactly the right moment. Yara looked at each of them. So here's the question, are we doing this for him, or are we doing this for everyone else? The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Kale had stopped eating, listening with the intense focus of someone who understood that adult conversations often determined his fate. Both, Soren said finally. We do what we have to do to survive and keep our word. But if we find something that could help people, all people, then we make sure it gets used that way. Idealistic, Yara said. Necessary, Soren countered. Because if we become like Dmitri, if we start hoarding and controlling and treating survival as a commodity, then what's the point? We might as well be infected, just monsters wearing different faces. Mireille surprised him by laughing, a short, sharp sound. An architect-philosopher. What a time to develop principles. Better late than never, Soren replied. Yara stood, slinging her medical bag over her shoulder. We leave at dawn. Dimitri's providing a reinforced SUV, weapons, supplies for a week. The drive is roughly 8 hours if the roads are clear, which they won't be. We'll need to navigate around cities, avoid major highways, and hope we don't encounter any large hordes. Once we reach the mountains, it's another 4 miles on foot to the facility itself. Why on foot? Mireille asked. Because the last 2 miles are through a quarantine zone that was napalmed during the initial outbreak. No vehicles can navigate the terrain. Yara's expression was grim. We walk through a graveyard to reach whatever might be waiting. Of course we do, Soren muttered. That night, Soren took first watch while the others slept. Kale curled up next to his sister, one hand resting on her arm as if physical contact could will her back to health. Mireille and Yara claimed opposite corners, both sleeping with weapons close at hand. In the darkness, Soren thought about paths and ashes and silence. The world had burned, leaving only quiet and the shambling dead. But somewhere in that silence, there might be words worth hearing. Somewhere in those ashes, there might be seeds of something new. Tomorrow would show them if hope was another casualty of the apocalypse or if it was the one thing that refused to die. Dawn broke gray and cold over the skeletal city. Dimitri's SUV waited where he'd promised, a black Suburban with reinforced plating welded to the doors and mesh screens over the windows. Supplies filled the back, weapons, ammunition, food, water, medical gear, and a detailed map marked with routes and danger zones. Dmitri himself stood beside the vehicle, flanked as always by his armed guards. Everything as promised, he said, handing Soren a set of keys. The tank is full. I've included extra fuel canisters. Radio equipment too, though I wouldn't count on finding anyone broadcasting. How generous, Mireille said, her tone suggesting the opposite. Generosity is an investment in the future, Dmitri replied smoothly. I expect a return on this investment. 7 days. If you're not back in 7 days, I'll assume you're dead and write off the loss. And if we find nothing? Yara asked. Then you come back and tell me that, and we explore other options. I'm a patient man. Dimitri's smile was cold mathematics. But I am not a forgiving one. Don't make the mistake of thinking you can take my resources and disappear. I have a long memory and longer reach. They loaded into the SUV without further conversation. Soren took the driver's seat, Mireille beside him, Yara in the back with the supplies. As they pulled away, Soren caught a final glimpse of Dmitri in the rearview mirror, standing still as a statue, watching them go with the expression of a man who'd already calculated all possible outcomes. The city gave way to suburbs, then to the open highway. The roads were obstacle courses of abandoned vehicles, some crashed, some simply stopped where their drivers had died or fled. Soren navigated carefully, using the shoulder when the main lanes were blocked, occasionally driving through medians or parking lots to bypass impossible tangles. The infected were everywhere and nowhere. They'd see none for miles, then suddenly encounter a cluster of 20 or more, drawn together by mysterious instinct. Soren learned to kill the engine and coast past them when possible, conserving fuel and avoiding attention. The creatures were slower in the cold, but no less dangerous when roused. "Tell me about your community," Mireille said to Yara during a long stretch of clear road. "The one you're so eager to leave." Yara was silent for a moment, organizing her thoughts. It started well. Dmitri found a warehouse district with good walls and clear sight lines. He recruited people with useful skills: doctors, engineers, former military, farmers. We established watches, rationing, work rotations. For the first month, it felt like civilization might actually survive. "What changed?" Soren asked. "Nothing changed. That's the problem." Dmitri revealed who he always was, and the rest of us had to decide if we could live with it. Yara's reflection in the rearview mirror was troubled. He started making decisions without consultation. Who got extra rations, who got the best shelter, who was assigned to the most dangerous supply runs. Always with justifications: efficiency, expertise, the greater good. But the pattern became clear. Loyalty to him meant safety. Questions meant risk. "Sounds like every authoritarian regime in history," Mireille observed. "Compressed into 3 months instead of decades," Yara agreed. "That's the horror of the apocalypse. It accelerates everything: death, adaptation, and the rise of petty tyrants who understand that desperate people trade freedom for safety without realizing the exchange rate." They drove through the morning and into the afternoon, stopping twice to clear roads and once to hide from a massive horde, at least 200 infected shambling along the highway in a grotesque parade. Soren killed the engine and they sat in breathless silence as the creatures passed, close enough to smell the decay, close enough to see the remnants of humanity in their rotting faces. When the last of them had moved on, Mireille released a shaking breath. "I'll never get used to that." "The day you get used to it is the day you should worry," Yara said. By late afternoon, they reached the mountains. The road began to climb, winding through pine forests where the silence felt even more profound. No infected here: either they'd never made it this far from population centers, or the cold had claimed them. But the absence of the dead didn't bring comfort. It brought the unnerving sensation of being utterly alone in a world that no longer had space for human life. The napalm zone appeared as the sun touched the western peaks. The forest simply ended, replaced by a blackened hellscape of charred stumps and scorched earth. The fire had created a barrier between the world and whatever lay beyond, and crossing it felt like stepping into the underworld. They parked the SUV at the zone's edge and continued on foot. The ash was ankle-deep, muffling their footsteps, coating their clothes and skin with gray powder. Nothing grew here. Nothing moved. It was silence absolute, the silence of complete death. "They did this deliberately," Yara said, her voice muffled by the cloth she'd tied over her mouth and nose. "Tried to contain the outbreak by burning a perimeter around the facility. Obviously it didn't work. Or it worked too well," Mireille suggested. "Trapped the researchers inside with the infected." "Comforting thought," Soren muttered. The facility appeared through the ash like a monument to hubris. It was built into the mountainside, concrete and steel reinforced to withstand assaults both natural and man-made. The entrance was a massive blast door, sealed tight, with a smaller access panel beside it. Above the door, stenciled in faded letters, "Fort Callahan Biological Research Station, authorized personnel only." "Well," Soren said. "We made it." "Making it here was the easy part," Yara replied. She approached the access panel, examining it with professional interest. Biometric scanner, keypad entry, probably retinal scan too. This place was designed to keep people out. Or keep something in, Mireille said quietly. Yara tried the panel anyway, unsurprised when nothing happened. No power. The facility must have backup generators, but they're not feeding the external systems. She looked around, studying the mountainside. There has to be an emergency exit. Building codes would require it, even for classified installations. They split up, searching the perimeter. It was Soren who found it, a maintenance hatch hidden behind an outcropping of rock, sealed with a manual lock rather than electronic security. The lock was rusted but intact. "Here," he called. The lock took 15 minutes and 3 different tools to break. When it finally gave way, the hatch opened with a groan of protesting metal, revealing a ladder descending into absolute darkness. "Last chance to turn back," Soren said. "To what?" Yara replied. "Dimitri's kingdom?" "No thanks." "The unknown versus the known evil," Mireille said. "I'll take my chances with the unknown." They descended into the dark, one after another, their flashlights carving small circles of illumination in the vast blackness. The ladder went down 50 feet, emerging in a concrete tunnel that stretched forward into shadow. The air was cold and stale, smelling of mold and something else, something organic and rotten. "Stay close," Soren whispered. "Watch for movement." They moved forward, weapons ready, every sense straining. The tunnel ended at a heavy door marked Maintenance Access, Sublevel 3. Yara tried the handle. It turned. The door opened onto a nightmare. The hallway beyond was a scene of carnage frozen in time. Bodies in lab coats and military uniforms littered the floor, their causes of death varying from obvious violence to the subtle suggestion of the infection. Emergency lighting strips gave off a weak red glow, casting everything in hellish illumination. And in the distance, echoing through the facility's corridors, came the sound they'd learned to dread, the wet, shuffling movement of the infected. "They're still here," Mireille breathed. "After 3 months, they're still here," Yara corrected. "Trapped. Preserved. Waiting." They moved through the facility with agonizing caution, clearing rooms one by one. The infected they encountered were slow, almost dormant, their systems nearly shut down for months without feeding. But they still responded to stimuli, movement, sound, light. Soren put down 3 of them with precise headshots, the suppressed rifle keeping noise to a minimum. Each kill felt like a small mercy, ending what should have died months ago. The facility was enormous. Sublevel 3 contained storage and maintenance. Sublevel 2 held administrative offices and living quarters. The real prize, Yara knew, would be on Sublevel 1, the research labs themselves. They found the stairwell and descended. The door to Sublevel 1 was sealed with a keypad lock, but someone had scrawled a code on the wall in what looked like dried blood, 7-7-7-7-7-7. Someone's final act, ensuring the research could be accessed or perhaps warning others away. The code worked. The research level was pristine compared to the chaos above. The lights here still functioned, powered by backup generators that had run for 3 months without interruption. The labs were sealed behind glass, their interiors visible but unreachable without proper authorization. Except one. Lab 7 stood open, its door propped wide by a body in a biohazard suit. Inside, they found the ghosts of the old world's last hope. Research notes scattered across workstations. Computers still running, their screens displaying data that meant nothing to Soren but made Yara gasp. Refrigeration units humming softly, containing vials of substances marked with codes and warnings. And on the main screen, a video file paused mid-playback, showing a woman in a lab coat, her eyes exhausted but determined. Yara pressed play. "My name is Dr. Samantha Reeves," the woman said. "If you're seeing this, then the facility has been compromised and I'm likely dead. I'm recording this as a final record of our work here at Fort Callahan. We were tasked with understanding the pathogen and developing countermeasures. We failed at the first and succeeded at the second, though our success came too late." The video flickered. Dr. Reeves consulted notes off-screen before continuing. "The pathogen is not natural. It's weaponized, designed for maximum transmission and minimum survivability. Someone created this deliberately. We found markers, genetic signatures that don't occur in nature. We tried to trace the source, but communication broke down before we could confirm our findings. What matters now is the work we completed. She held up a vial of clear liquid. This is Hope 7. An immunity serum. It doesn't cure the infected, nothing can reverse the cellular damage. But it prevents infection in the uninfected. We tested it on ourselves, on volunteers from the military detachment. 100% effectiveness over a 4-week trial period. It works. Yara's hand flew to her mouth. Mireille moved closer to the screen. Soren felt his heart hammering. The serum requires refrigeration and has a shelf life of approximately 6 months. The manufacturing process is complex but reproducible with the right equipment and materials. All the data is stored on the facility's servers, backed up on isolated drives in Lab 7. Take it. Use it. Save whoever's left to save. Dr. Reeves' expression crumbled, revealing the fear beneath the professional composure. We tried to share this. We sent transmissions, reports, physical samples via military courier. But the world was already dying. No one responded. No one came. The infection breached our facility 2 weeks ago. We sealed the sublevels, but it's only a matter of time. I'm recording this from Lab 7, which I've locked down. The others are gone. I'm alone. And I'm afraid. She wiped her eyes, forcing herself to continue. Whoever you are, whatever brought you here, don't let this be for nothing. The serum is our legacy. Humanity's last gift to itself. Please. Don't let us die for nothing. The video ended. In the silence that followed, Yara moved to the refrigeration units and opened them with trembling hands. Inside were hundreds of vials, each containing the clear liquid from Dr. Reeves' video. Hundreds of doses of immunity, waiting in the dark for someone to find them. My God, Yara whispered. It's real. She actually did it. We need to take everything, Mireille said. The vials, the data, all of it. They spent the next hour working frantically. Yara downloaded data onto portable drives while Soren and Mireille packed the vials into insulated cases designed for biological transport. They found Dr. Reeves' body in the back of the lab, a self-inflicted gunshot wound suggesting she'd chosen her end rather than waiting for the infection to find her. Yara closed the woman's eyes and whispered a prayer in a language Soren didn't recognize. It was as they were preparing to leave that they heard it, footsteps in the corridor. Multiple sets. Moving with purpose, not the shambling gait of the infected. Soren raised his rifle. The door opened. Dmitri walked in, flanked by 6 armed men. Thank you for doing the hard work, he said, his smile triumphant. I knew you'd come through. Now, I'll take what you found, and you can go back to your basement and dying children. Our arrangement is concluded. You followed us, Mireille said. I invested in you. I protect my investments. Dmitri gestured to the cases of serum. This is more valuable than I dared hope. With this, I don't just lead a community, I lead a nation. Anyone who wants to survive comes to me, submits to me, serves me. This is the foundation of a new world, and I will be its architect. No, Yara said simply. Dimitri's expression hardened. That wasn't a request. What happened next occurred in seconds. Yara grabbed one of the cases and hurled it against the wall. Vials shattered, serum splashing across the floor. Dimitri's men opened fire, but Mireille had already moved, tackling Yara behind a lab bench. Soren returned fire, dropping one of Dimitri's men and forcing the others to take cover. Stop! Dmitri screamed. You're destroying it. Better destroyed than enslaving people. Yara shouted back. The firefight was brief and brutal. Soren took a round in the shoulder, feeling the white-hot shock of impact. Mireille killed 2 more of Dimitri's men with precise shots. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. Then Yara did the unthinkable. She stood, holding the last intact case of serum, and moved toward the facility's emergency protocols panel. Everyone stops shooting, or I trigger the sterilization protocol. Extreme heat. Kills everything in the lab, including the serum, the data, all of it. You're bluffing, Dimitri said. Try me. Yara's finger hovered over the button. You know my record. You know I don't bluff. Dimitri's jaw clenched. Slowly, he lowered his weapon and gestured for his men to do the same. You've made a grave mistake. No, Yara said. I'm correcting one. This serum doesn't belong to one man. It belongs to everyone. Idealistic fool. The world doesn't work that way anymore. Then we make it work that way. Yara's voice was steel. Here's what's going to happen. We take half the serum and half the data. You take the other half. We go our separate ways. You build your kingdom if you must, but you won't have a monopoly on survival. And if I refuse? Yara pressed the button slightly. Warning lights began to flash. Then none of us get it. Mutually assured destruction. Your choice. The standoff lasted an eternity compressed into seconds. Then Dimitri smiled, not the cold calculation of before, but something worse. Respect. Very well. A draw. This time. He gestured to his remaining men. Take half the cases. Leave the rest. They divided the serum and data in tense silence. When it was done, Dimitri paused at the door. This isn't over. We'll meet again, and next time, you won't have leverage. Looking forward to it, Soren said through gritted teeth, his shoulder bleeding. Then they were gone. The journey back was agony. Soren's shoulder wound needed treatment they couldn't provide on the move, so they drove straight through, taking turns at the wheel. 20 hours of exhausted vigilance, jumping at every shadow, expecting Dimitri's ambush around every corner. But it never came. They reached the city at dawn, the sun rising over the ruins like a promise or a threat. Kale was waiting in the basement, his face lighting up when he saw them. Eloan sat propped against the wall, pale but conscious, her fever broken. You came back, Kale said, wonder in his voice. Told you I would, Soren replied, wincing as Yara cut away his bloody shirt to examine the wound. While Yara worked on Soren's shoulder, Mireille explained what they'd found to Kale and Eloan. The children listened with the solemn attention of those who'd grown up too fast, understanding the weight of what had been discovered. So the serum makes people immune? Eloan asked, her voice weak but curious. Yes, Yara said. It can't bring back the dead or cure the infected. But it can protect those of us still human. It's a chance. Maybe the only chance we'll get. What will you do with it? Kale asked. That was the question. They'd taken 12 cases of serum, hundreds of doses. Enough to inoculate a small community or to seed multiple groups across the region. The data drives contained everything needed to manufacture more, given the right equipment and expertise. We share it, Soren said, his voice firm despite the pain. We find other survivors, other communities. We give them the serum and the knowledge. We make sure it spreads, that it can't be controlled or hoarded. Dimitri will try to stop you, Yara warned. Then we move fast and stay ahead of him. Mireille checked the map they'd taken from the facility. There were survivor broadcasts before the networks died. Some of them might still have people. We find them, we share what we have, we build something better than what we lost. That's a nice dream, Eloan said. But dreams don't survive out there. No, Soren agreed, looking at the girl who'd almost died, at her brother who'd refused to give up, at the 2 women who'd risked everything for strangers and principles. But people do. And as long as people survive, dreams have a chance. They spent 3 days in the basement, resting and planning. Yara treated Soren's wound and pronounced it healing cleanly. Eloan grew stronger each day, the antibiotics defeating the infection that had nearly claimed her. Kale, for the first time since they'd met him, smiled. On the 4th day, they inoculated all of them with Hope 7. The serum burned going in, but Yara assured them that was normal. Your immune system learning to recognize and destroy the pathogen before it can take hold. You'll be safe within 72 hours. Safe from infection, Mireille corrected. Not from the infected themselves. One problem at a time. They prepared to leave the city, planning a route that would take them to the smaller towns and communities marked on their maps. They would become missionaries of a sort, spreading immunity and information, building networks of survival that couldn't be controlled by any one person. On their last night in the basement, Soren stood watch while the others slept. He thought about the title that had come to him in his dreams, The Hidden Path to Tomorrow. Begins in the ashes of yesterday and the silence of today. It made sense now. The world had burned. The silence of death had settled over everything. But in that silence, if you listened carefully, you could hear the whispers of possibility. And in those ashes, if you looked closely, you could see the green shoots of new growth. Dr. Reeves had given them a gift, paid for with her life and the lives of everyone at Fort Callahan. It would be wrong to waste it. It would be criminal to let it become a tool of oppression. Can't sleep? Kale had appeared beside him, quiet as a ghost. Too much to think about, Soren admitted. Are you scared? Of what comes next? Terrified, Soren said honestly. But I'm more scared of giving up. Of becoming like Dimitri, treating survival as something to be bought and sold. Kale nodded, understanding beyond his years. My dad used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when things are easy, but what they do when everything's falling apart. He said that's when you see who people really are. Your dad was wise. He was, Kale said quietly. I watched him die. One of those things bit him, and he knew what was coming. He told me to take Eloan and run. I wanted to stay, but he made me promise. He said the world would need good people to rebuild it, and I had to make sure Eloan lived long enough to be one of them. Soren put his hand on the boy's shoulder. He'd be proud of you. I hope so. I hope wherever he is, he knows we're okay. That people like you exist. Kale looked up at Soren with old, tired eyes. Promise me something. If I can. Don't let the world make you hard. Don't let it turn you into someone who stops caring. Because the moment we stop caring about each other, those things win. Even if we're still breathing, they win. Soren felt his throat tighten. I promise. Dawn came, and with it, departure. They loaded the SUV with everything they'd salvaged, serum, data, supplies, hope. Yara took the wheel. Mireille navigated. Kale and Eloan sat in the back, the children who'd survived when so many hadn't. And Soren, his shoulder healing, his rifle ready, watched the dead city recede in the side mirror. Somewhere out there, Dimitri was building his empire. Somewhere out there, the infected still shambled through empty streets. Somewhere out there, the world that had been was buried under ash and silence. But also out there, somewhere, were people worth saving. Communities worth protecting. A future worth fighting for. The path was hidden, obscured by the debris of yesterday and the quiet of today. But it existed. And they would find it, 1 mile, 1 survivor, 1 dose of hope at a time. As they drove into the rising sun, Soren allowed himself something he hadn't felt in 3 months, not quite optimism, but its quieter cousin, possibility. The apocalypse had taken everything. But it hadn't taken everything. And that made all the difference. Behind them, in the basement they'd abandoned, Soren had left a message scratched into the concrete wall. Just a few words, for whoever might come after. Hope 7 is real. Find us. We'll share. The hidden path to tomorrow had begun. The ashes of yesterday still smoldered. The silence of today still pressed down like a weight. But in that silence, there were voices. In those ashes, there were seeds. And in the ruins of what had been, there was, impossibly, the foundation of what might be. The road ahead was long and uncertain. The dangers were real and deadly. The outcome was far from guaranteed. But they drove forward anyway, into the light of a new day, carrying with them the last gift of the old world and the first promise of the new. And if that wasn't hope, it was close enough to keep them going. For now, that was enough.